Welcome to HortTube, where we talk all things gardening. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is a Leyland Cypress. I'm going to go over general information about Leyland Cypress through this video, and then toward the end I'll give you a few reasons why you should probably avoid this plant. This is Leyland Cypress, an extremely popular, very fast growing evergreen screening plant. Leyland Cypress is very fast growing, to say the least. This plant can grow 2 to 3 feet in a single season once it's established. Keep in mind that all conifers, when you plant them, no matter how fast they grow, once they're rooted into the ground, they'll grow very slowly for the first couple of years, and then they'll take off very, very quickly. This plant can reach probably 80 feet in height over a period of time. Originally, in the books that were originally released when this plant came out 30 years ago, these things got 12 or 15 feet tall, and now of course we've seen them 80 plus, and there's probably one that's 100 feet tall out there that I haven't seen. Another issue on the size of these is also the width. As this thing gets over 40 or 50 feet tall, it actually becomes pretty wide at the bottom, maybe 15 to 20 feet in width. So if you're on a small lot, this is probably not a great plant for a screening plant. Of course, if you have plenty of open space, then it certainly would be. Leyland Cypress is very cold hardy and can actually grow all the way up to zone 5 and then down to zone 9, which is very different winter climates in those two areas. So it does have a diverse area that it can grow in. One of the main reasons that Leyland Cypress is so popular as a screening plant is its rate of growth. This thing can grow 3+ feet a year once it's established. Keep in mind, the first year you put it in the ground, it'll probably grow very little. And then once it's established, 2 to 3 years later, it'll pick up that pace. You'll probably get 6 inches the first year and 12 inches the second year, and then maybe 2 feet the third year. Leyland Cypress prefer a half a day sun or more all the way to full sun. If you put this plant in a lot of dense shade, it will definitely grow thinner and not perform the way it is intended to. It really needs some of that direct midday and afternoon sun in order to stay full all the way to the base. The main usage of Leyland Cypress is definitely as a screening plant. Almost always you're going to see these planted probably too close together, probably 6 feet or less, and in a perfectly straight line. And that's the normal use for them. Occasionally I'll see one that's been planted where a person just wanted a big, large Christmas tree looking plant as kind of a central theme to their garden. When we're planting Leyland Cypress, if you're planting in a heavy clay soil, I would definitely mix in some pine bark soil conditioner. It's what we're growing this in, and it's just a composted pine bark. If you're planting in very sandy soils, you're definitely going to want to retain some moisture in between rains and waterings, and I would use some compost for that, maybe 50-50 with the sand, or maybe some peat moss 50-50 with the sand. We also want to elevate these. One of the main issues, I think, on Leylands and some of the troubles they have is people tend to plant them right in their turf area, and not mulch around them. Or if they mulch them, they end up mulching way up the trunks. And so some of the issues we may have with them are actually related to how they were planted in the first place. So with that in mind, let's dig the whole depth of the root ball, which in this case might be 10 inches deep. And we'll dig it about twice as wide as the container you bought it in. Mix whatever amendment that you need. So if you've dug clay out of the ground and you mix the pine bark soil conditioner 50-50 with it, place some of that soil conditioner mix back into the bottom of the hole, maybe 2 inches deep. Pull your plant out of the container. Almost certainly the roots are going to be wound very tightly. So pull at those some and get them going outward instead of continuing to wrap around. They're usually not too bad on these. They're thicker roots and they're easy to kind of unwind from one another a little bit. Set your plant down in that hole, so now it's sticking up a couple inches, and then pull your soil up to the edge of that. And then whatever you're mulching with, pine straw, hardwood mulch, red mulch, brown mulch, doesn't really matter. You can put it fairly thick between the plants, but as you get closer to the trunk, thin it out, and you don't want anything up on the trunk of these plants. And that should allow the plant to shed water a little bit, being elevated like that, and not stay abnormally wet, and then also keep pests away from the trunk of it by not burying it in mulch. In terms of watering Leyland Cypress, once they're established, I think for the first 9 months or so, you're definitely going to want to occasionally drag a water hose to them if they're becoming dry until they're rooted in. And when you do that, saturate the entire area around the plant. We want to encourage it to root out into the surrounding soil. If you just water right at the base of the plant, it really won't have any reason to root out into the drier surrounding soil. But after about 9 months or maybe a year, this thing's going to need very little additional watering from you. But if it becomes very dry, these are not very good at letting you know they're dry. They'll just start to thin out in the middle. You'll start to get brown needles in the middle of them, and then they'll just thin out. And so if it does become, even if you go a month in a 90-degree summer and these are only 2 or 3 years old, you might want to consider dragging a water hose over to them, or putting in a drip hose when you first plant your line of these, and so that in the future you can just hook a water hose to it. I would not put these on any kind of automated irrigation system. It is not a plant that needs that kind of ongoing watering. Leyland Cypress are acid-loving plants, and you could use any kind of azalea, camellia, rhododendron fertilizer, or something like holly tone would be perfect for them. If you think your soil is already very acidic, you could just use any slow-release outdoor fertilizer that's something that would last 3 or 4 months. I just do it in the spring. Maybe while you're trying to establish them early on and get some growth on them, you do a second application in the early to midsummer. Probably before the 4th of July though. That way the fertilizer runs out in time for them to kind of go into a winter dormancy as they slow down. If you want to do any pruning on your Leylands, you're going to have to do it kind of while they're smaller. Once they take off and start adding 3 feet a year, it's going to be nearly impossible. This plant has a couple limbs sticking out a little further on the side than some others, and we might trim these back a little bit. We want to make sure that we don't cut the central leader out, or we're going to end up with 2 leaders, and that's a disaster on these if you get an ice storm with a Leyland Cypress that has 2 leaders. So we want to avoid cutting anything on that central leader, but the pieces on the side could be cut back a little bit. Keep in mind, the more pruning you do on the edge of this plant, the thicker it's going to become, and it may hold up even less to ice and wind and some of the issues that this plant actually has. In terms of insect or disease problems, Leyland Cypress get quite a few. They're susceptible to spider mites. They're of course very susceptible to bagworms. We've seen that more and more. They're also susceptible to Phytophthora root rot and some canker issues, dieback issues. So they really do have quite a few problems. And another issue you may have if you plant these out on the edge of a yard and you have deer issues is deer will rub on these and do some damage to them that way, breaking limbs off. Let's talk about some of the issues with Leyland Cypress. We just had Hurricane Matthew come through my state, and I am in central North Carolina, and we didn't get the worst of the flooding, but we did have 12 inches of rain. The wind was, light for a hurricane from, the distance we were away from it. So with just 25-mile-an-hour winds and a heavy rain like that, it saturated the ground, and of course then added weight to the foliage on these, they're laying down all over the place in my area. And I'm talking about 40-foot tall, 50-foot tall trees that are extremely hard to clean up. I cannot stress to you, I landscaped for a long time. I have removed plenty of 40 and 50-foot Leyland Cypress, and you don't want to experience it. It is really, really a hard job to remove one of these once they're that big. The caliper on the base of these things is 12 inches or more on a big one, and it'll take you weeks, or it'll be very expensive to hire someone to do it. Like I say, I would just avoid these at this point. At some point, you're going to experience a wind storm that's going to knock one over or dislodge it a little bit. Ice is just the absolute enemy of these, and will just pull them straight out of the ground. If you're on the eastern side of the United States and you're vulnerable to getting any kind of tropical storms or hurricanes, these things will come down very easily. We also have insect problems now, and soil-borne diseases and foliar diseases, and so they just have all kinds of issues. This is a plant that was just been overplanted, and we saw this with a plant called red tip Photinia years ago that we overplanted, and then it got all kinds of problems. But this plant already had some problems. It's its own worst enemy. It grows so thick and so tall and has such a shallow root system that the weight of the top just can't be anchored down by the roots that it has. So anyway, in my opinion, I would avoid it, but we still sell hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, and most nurseries do, all over the place. People still want them. I understand. They're beautiful. When these things are doing what they're supposed to do, they're absolutely beautiful. And so I can definitely see the appeal in it. So what are you waiting for? Even you can grow the very fast growing screening plant, Leyland Cypress, for a little while. Thank you for watching. And if this video was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also, comment below with any questions or comments you have about Leyland Cypress.